Welcome to the Doctor's Corner with Dr. Kline and Janelle Elgaway. And good evening, Caw Nation, and welcome to the Doctor's Corner with Dr. Kline. I'm your producer for the evening, Brian Grimes, and without further ado, let's introduce the star of the show, Dr. Kline. Good evening, Dr. Kline.
Good evening, Brian. Star of the show? Did I tell you to say that? Anyway. So the CDC can pass regulations, and I saw their list. Things about infectious disease and turtles with salmonella and really a wide range of things. But absent from the list was anything to do with the practice of medicine or with prescription drugs, especially opiate prescription drugs. So agencies that have a mandate generally don't try to publish things that look like regulations. That's what they did. They published guidelines for opiate prescribing for chronic pain. That sounds like a regulation to me, and it sounded like a rule and regulation to everybody else because everybody adopted it. Many states, I have an article where the Assistant Attorney General of the United States adopted the CDC, quote, regulations. They're even using the wrong word. And meanwhile, in the background, we have another big agency, the FDA, and guess what their job is? They are the rulemaking authority who can write regulations for all drugs. Nobody else can. And as we've said before on this show, the FDA says there are no limits on prescription opiate drugs, except for tramadol and a little family of oddball drugs. But all the ones that we use on a daily basis, there is no federal limit. So how did this happen? Steve, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I think that, and I agree with you 100%, is that the CDC went way outside of their statute authority because they are charged with infectious diseases, period. And the last medical journals I looked at, chronic pain and substance abuse or addiction, if you like that word, is not contagious. And the latter is, according to current and previous surgeon generals, and the new head of the CDC, is a mental health disease and not a moral failing. I think there was some interagency cooperation to get those out there because I forgot the name of the previous CDC director.
Frieden.
After they published those same things, Yeah,
Thomas
he was
Frieden.
out there going, this is just guidelines, this is just guidelines, it's nothing to do with the law. But in the reality of it all, once more 50% or more of the healthcare community, healthcare provider community, however you want to label it, adopts a process or what have you, policies, it becomes a standard of care and best practices. So once that happens, and the VA jumped on it right away, and a lot of big corporations like Kaiser and some of these guys that they employ tons of prescribers as employees. So the DEA will soon have, if they don't already have, experts who will come in and go, this doctor prescribed outside of what is standard of practice and best care and standards of practice. Guilty.
Yeah, that's kind of a scary thing. Suppose the standard of practice became to sterilize all people with developmental disabilities like they did 50 years ago. That becomes something difficult to defend, as you point out, because then they can say, well, everybody else has adopted these bad guidelines, therefore you have to. That's tricky, Mm-hmm. So I think
or you're guilty if you haven't done it.
Yeah, or you're guilty and you're over-prescribing. I noticed in one of your articles, you said something that surprised me because this is what I've been preaching, that addiction is rare. It's less than 1%. And this has an interesting connotation. If it's less than 1%, it's rare. But wait a minute, we have all these people prescribing too much. Shouldn't it be more? Where are the additional heroin opiate addicts? Where are they?
Well, they talk about anybody who has used an opiate for a non-medicinal use in those numbers, I think.
You are correct.
The 1 or 2% figure. Yeah, the 1 or 2% figure, however, I've seen anywhere in that range of our population. That's been a fairly constant for the last 100+ years.
Yeah. So anytime a disease with a fixed incidence and prevalence, there's only one explanation. It has to be genetic. How can a disease that fluctuates like and what people don't understand when you write articles is the addiction community, if you talk to them, you find out that fentanyl's there 1 month, heroin's there another month. It's an extremely dynamic, moving thing. And you would think that over the years, with all this comings and goings, that we would have a variable addiction rate. But it's not. It's the same, as you just said, over the last 100 years. So think about it for a minute. If it's genetic and it's only 1%, and we can't seem to find any additional addiction, although people claim there's been more addiction, but I don't see any figures anywhere. There's really been no further addiction. Lots of overdose deaths and people who are on the street dying. But that means that 99.5% of the population cannot become addicted. If they could become addicted, we should have a much higher rate of real opiate addiction than less than 1%. If that's the case, the entire war on drugs, which is only opiate drugs, would collapse. If you cannot physically addict me or Brian or yourself, no matter how much you take for any length of time, then there's no reason to have a war. How does that sound?
Yeah, and the other day I had a mental flash. I was reading something and they were talking about babies being born to addicted mothers, and they said they come out addicted. And I go, no, they come out dependent, just like they come out dependent on nutrition and air.
Yeah. And
yes, they may end up being an addict at some point in time because of their genetics.
Yeah, that's true. Babies do withdrawal. It depends on how much is crossing the placenta. But, you know,
But
pediatricians
that's
and
from
obstetricians,
dependency.
yeah, we've been right. That's a physical dependency. Exactly. And so the baby doesn't have the addiction genes. So the baby is kind of like a pain patient who's on opiates and decides to taper off. Maybe they don't need them anymore, and they'll go through a little withdrawal, but you slowly taper and it's fine. But they do not have the genes for addiction. You are correct, in which case the withdrawals.
Well, now they may have the genes. They may have the genes from the mother who is a substance abuser and addicted, but that is not a black and white scenario even at that.
Well, I'm an ex-pediatrician, and we used to take care of the babies, and they're a little uncomfortable for a while, but they get through it okay. And then it hits the newspaper as one more proof that we are so afraid of opiate addiction that we're just making up stories and embellishing them. We're kind of back to the old yellow journalism of Randolph Hearst. We really are. It's shameful, the articles that are published, including the New York Times. But we were talking before the show, and one of the things we want to start doing is, what do? The government is running around like a chicken with their head cut off because, and this was a line off a TV show where the actor said, when people say we got to do something, usually means they don't know what to do. So people are running around trying to protect the general public because they believe that any opiate is liable to cause an addiction. I've got a high school kid working in my office helping me file. He just had a lecture from his teacher in health class that said anyone can become addicted. Nope. Wrong. 99.5% of people will never become addicted, no matter what. And we mentioned the Vietnam studies where soldiers came back on intravenous heroin, high dose, pure stuff, took them off, went through withdrawals. 2% became street addicted. That's intravenous heroin for months and months. So we can kind of stipulate that it's really gone off the tracks. There's a lot of fear about addiction phobia, and we've tried to present facts, and like you have, Steve, with lots and lots of publications, and I write all these publications and on my Medium, and people, oh, that's wonderful, oh, Dr. Kline, but the wrong people are reading them. What good is it that all the pain patients read them and cheer us on? So we really need to focus on what to do. So what we are doing is a woman by the name of Claudia Morandi in Rhode Island is trying to get the legislature to pass a Pain Patient Protection Act, and a lot of that has to do with pharmacists and pharmacists denying prescriptions. And we are here in North Carolina going to do the same thing. We're going to approach our legislature, and we're going to have a team. Our talking team or lobbying team is going to be one physician, one pharmacist, and one pain patient. And we're going to go as a triumvirate. And we're going to present the problem, list the problem, and then what we suggest needs to be done. But the legislators really do like to help out, and they like to figure out things. So we're going to talk to staffers first. My approach is you talk to staffers, because if you can convince the staffer, then the staffer convinces the representative or senator, you're home free. So what can we do at a state level, Steve? One of the things we were thinking about was if a pharmacist refuses to fill a prescription, which they have the right to do, and I don't think we should abrogate that right, because just as
within certain parameters.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, these pharmacists that go, I'm not comfortable.
Yeah.
No, I'm not comfortable. It's not a clinical reason. It's a lame excuse.
Yep.
And that's Florida passed a law back in 2015 that the pharmacists had to get 2 hours worth of education, continuing education every year. And the focus of the law, the regulation within the Practice Act, was the pharmacist was not supposed to start looking for a reason not to fill it.
Okay, so they told them.
I can guarantee you, if I start looking for a reason not to fill it, I'll find one.
Sure. Now, what
somewhat.
about, because of the extreme nature of this, what would you think that if a pharmacist denies the initial prescription, that it needs to be co-signed by the pharmacy manager, or it needs to be recorded somehow, not reviewed, but just recorded at the Board of Pharmacy?
Our minds must run on similar paths.
Oh, dear.
Are you the brother from another mother that I never met? This week, I have been thinking about creating a template for the patient who gets a refusal from either a doctor or a pharmacist that says, write down why you're refusing this and sign it. Because and I know in the medical profession, if it isn't documented, it didn't happen.
Right.
And I've been tossing this template around the back of my head for that very reason. And I was going to hit Pat and Ed up and publish it in my blog and see if we couldn't stir up some stuff here.
Tell me more about what it would be like. Is this a form?
Well, it would just.
Yeah, explain more.
Well, so one thing, I have an intractable pain wife, so that's one of the reasons I'm in this. So I'm a do-gooder, but I'm also she's taken care of. I really don't have a dog in this fight as far as her meds are concerned. But it would be a rather simplistic form. Patient puts in their name and their address and the date, and they could even write down refused prescription for oxycodone, whatever, and just ask the doctor or the pharmacist, give me the clinical reason why you're refusing to do this, and sign it, and print your name because you can't read your damn signature, and date it, and I've got documentation now in my hands, the clinical reason you turned it down, not because you weren't comfortable.
Yeah, I think being uncomfortable is pretty lily-livered. I mean, I could be uncomfortable with all my patients, Oh, you're making me uncomfortable. You got a sore throat. My God, you could give it to me, the comfort zone is not really going to work. So, in other words, the pharmacist would be required to fill out this.
And the doctor,
form.
I use it for a doctor as well. Okay. I mean, use it for anything. But see, people don't realize that pharmacies are mandated by federal and state law to keep a perpetual inventory of all C2s.
Right.
Every time they dispense a prescription, they put it in the log. Every time they get an order in, they put it in the log.
Yeah.
If they're right on their out of stock and date it, you can take the pharmacy board and it says, I want you to check their inventory at this date and this time.
Yeah.
As to what was on hand. Is it unprofessional conduct to lie to a patient?
Yeah. Okay. So the pharmacist would be required to fill out this form that the patient would carry to them, or would the pharmacy board mandate that this form has?
The patient. I'm looking for the patient to initiate this. It may go someplace else if we get enough people doing it, but I'm looking at some pharmacists are very bad at documenting things they don't do.
Mm-hmm.
We fill prescriptions, we date, and we quantity and the strength and all the other stuff deals with prescription. But when we don't do something, we don't document it.
So if you turn down a patient, you don't document it. You just say, get lost.
No.
Yeah, that's, and I think, now do you think the pharmacist would go for this, or do you think the pharmacy lobby, like with the big corporations and stuff, would scream and yell?
They may scream and yell, but the thing of it is, you got to start someplace.
Yeah, right. I have done some
Whip
Twitter
out your
polls.
smartphone and turn on the camera.
Yeah, okay. I've done some Twitter polls, and people criticize these. So we say, well, these are like doing a poll on the street where you go around with your camera, and say, what are you dressing up as for Christmas? So but according to these polls, which are probably pretty good, at least to the point that they should be replicated, 40% of people are having trouble at chain pharmacies. 40%. That's a real problem. A significant number, I have to look it up, about 30% are being castigated, being humiliated, being accused of being addicts. So I think that the general public needs to know that the pharmacy boards, I think, would like to hear this. Wouldn't you agree?
I'm not sure the pharmacy board. I'm not sure the pharmacy boards would like to hear this because they're mostly stacked with non-practicing corporate pharmacists.
Oh, okay. Yeah, people who got the time to sit in there and.
Well, but they're also the people that draw a paycheck from Rite Aid and Walgreens and CVS and so on and so forth. And while they are competitors out in the marketplace, when they get into that kind of boardroom, they are very staunch advocates of the chain pharmacy community. Okay.
What do you think about community advisory groups?
I'm not familiar with the concept.
Okay, so police departments frequently start a community advisory group where citizens can bring complaints to the group. The group takes it to the police department. Most big hospitals, like in Boston, they had community liaison groups, and depending on how they're set up, how much power they have. So if a person is having trouble with the hospital, they go to this citizens group first as an ombudsman, then the ombudsman takes the issue to the hospital. You can see that this could get watered down, but in some places, these citizen advisory groups are very powerful. So in other words, the legislature can, when there's a lot of bad things going on and a lot of people trying to cover it up and be deceitful, like is going on in the pharmacies, the Citizens Advisory Board would report to the legislature. And the legislature would then go to the pharmacy board, because the pharmacy board is created and controlled by the legislature, and say, hey, correct, what's going on here? And start to put pressure. That's how our democracy works. The legislative branch actually controls, in theory, the legislative branch controls the executive branch, and the way they control it is with money. You don't play ball, and we'll cut off your funds. And that's why the House and Ways and Means Committee.
Most pharmacy boards are underfunded anyway, so.
There you go. Make it worse. Start cutting some salaries. But to me, it's gotten so bad. And what you've said is what I've heard from other pharmacists too. Going to the pharmacy board is a waste of time. And then they just have a bunch of investigators, and they're just investigating. They don't really do policy. So you can't complain to an investigator. And I've talked to some investigators here, and they're very nice, and they do a good job. And they've been bringing up some issues of. So I like your idea. Now, here's the next problem, and it's more serious. If a pharmacist begins to fill a prescription, so fills the first 30 days, and then there's a prescription for the next 30 days, and the pharmacist decides at that point to cut off the medication. In Texas, they are interpreting that as practicing medicine without a license. It's one thing to refuse to take a client or patient and but it's quite another to attempt to end their medical treatment. I have a few perks as a licensed physician, and one of them is I can write prescriptions. But that also means I have the prerogative to stop the prescriptions. Nobody else has that. And so the issue,
I have simplified. I have routinely tried to simplify the practice of medicine. It's to diagnose and cure, or treat and maintain.
Yeah.
And then within that scope is starting, changing, and stopping a patient's medicine or therapy. A little broader, just medicine therapy. That's the practice of medicine. Boiled down to the fewest words I can put together.
I like that.
Would you concur that that's as concise as you can probably get it?
Yes, because we're kind of like agencies, who write rules. In other words, There are some rules about being a licensed practitioner or being a licensed pharmacist. We got these rules, and there aren't that many. We're the only ones that can make a diagnosis, like, for example, palliative care. No one can unmake a diagnosis except licensed medical person. So when people say, oh, I don't believe you have palliative care, I disagree with that. Too bad. I have made the diagnosis and no one can unmake it. Now, another physician can try to unmake it, but that's, that's dirty pool.
And there's one thing that you haven't touched upon, in is that under the Controlled Substance Act, a physician or a prescriber cannot prescribe controlled substances for a patient unless they've done an in-person physical exam.
Correct.
So if a pharmacist is changing, they're de-prescribing basically.
Yes.
And we don't have the training or the education or the facilities to do an in-person exam.
Yep. And I've heard in Texas, the Texas Medical Board, who licenses doctors, is sending out cease and desist orders to pharmacists who are stopping an existing prescription and saying, you are basically committing a felony. Practicing medicine without a license is a felony, a serious charge. And so the Texas Medical Board is sending out these notices, cease and desist, cutting off people's prescriptions. So I think this could be incorporated in a patient protection law. We have initial prescriptions, like you said, with the form, where pharmacists are going to have to just say. Also, I think that physicians, a pharmacist, like you said, and the doctor both need to sign off, because what's going on, from what I hear from people, is the pharmacist is just refusing to fill the prescription, doesn't call the doctor. So this happened to me in an out-of-state patient who came to see me, and the pharmacy became uncomfortable because the local PDMP flagged the patient as having too high a dose. Well, that's anybody over 90 milligrams. And incidentally, a little poll that I did, 2/3 of people require more than 90 milligrams. Nobody's ever really asked, but I did. And so the pharmacist...
I'm wondering if physicians who use those conversion programs could be charged with malpractice, because they're all stating in the footnotes that they're crude estimates at best and don't use them.
Well, even the CDC says if you're going to be switching drugs, start off with 50%. So there you go. It's not working.
Yeah.
Might as well just, invent something.
Well,
that's another point. Yes, these are not valid. They're done in animals. They're and by the way, just there's no range given either. It's just a number. Well, actually, they have ranges, like in all science. It's like a women in the United States, the average height is 5'7". So the U.S. Army, for all its women, should just buy clothes and uniforms for 5'7" women. That's how it works.
And how do you equate somebody from an oral med to fentanyl patches?
Yeah, exactly, or IV. Yeah, these things need to go, and see, and that can be incorporated, like the AMA's recent statements that nobody should be following the 90 milligram cutoff. That's basically what they said. So that could be incorporated into the law and start attacking the CDC guidelines. Don't you think that even on the initial prescription, where pharmacists have the prerogative to say no, that they should call the physician?
Gentlemen, let me jump in here for just a second. You do have a call holding there, Dr. Kline.
Okay. Let's take the call. We like to hear from the rest of the world. Steve and I are just here in our little offices, away from the real world. So go ahead.
All right. Very good. A caller from area code 412. What's your first name and what is your question for Dr. Kline?
Fire when ready, Gridley.
We're trying to get them up here.
I actually have a few questions for Dr. Kline.
All right.
About the whole opioid hysteria. I've been a pain patient, been on medication for 6 years now. I'm 36 years old. I've had 3 hip surgeries due to avascular necrosis. I've been on Percocet. My PCP would give me Percocet years ago. So long story short, I just had.
I bet you walk funny with 3 hips.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, I had the left one done. I had the left one done twice. I just had a revision this December.
Yeah,
this
nasty disease. Have you had trouble getting prescriptions filled?
I just have lately. So what happened was I went to my PCP for years. He would prescribe me pain meds. He retired. Actually, the state or somebody called him one day and told him he was no longer allowed to write opioid prescriptions.
Oh,
so he was an elderly man. I think he was in his 80s, so he just retired.
Yeah.
Since then, I found a pain clinic that is in the same clinic. I have an infectious disease issue also. So my infectious disease doctor, it's all the same clinic, but they have a separate pain doctor. I've been going to her for a year. She's been prescribing me. We went with 4 10-milligram Percocet, and then I was still in pain. So when this was a year ago, she said, 4's not enough. These were her exact words. She said, "Don't be a hero. Sometimes it's not. If you need more, let us know. Sometimes it's not a thing of chemical dependence. It's under
good for her.
Being the proper dose. Well, so she bumped me to 6. So I've been on 6 for a year. I did this surgery in November, thinking that because I had bone spurs in the hip and the lining of the cup was a little kinked. I thought all my pain would go away. It is not. It's still the same excruciating pain that I've had for 6 years now.
But the medicine does work.
This pain doc. Yeah, but this pain doctor has now taken me off the Percocet and put me on Suboxone.
What do you think of that,
and
Steve? Do you think Suboxone is a good painkiller, a good substitute?
You asking me?
Yes, Steve. Go ahead. Our pharmacist.
I think there's two problems here. One, it's not worth a damn for anything past maybe mild pain, and 2, somewhere down the pike, somebody is going to look at your records and go, Suboxone, oh, he's got a substance abuse problem, and tack that diagnosis onto your list.
Yep.
Correct. Well, the problem is...
Other than that, perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can't take it. I can't function. I feel high and dizzy. And
on the Suboxone. Okay.
But yes. In her notes, she's changing her notes to fit her narrative to keep me on Suboxone. So that's more my question: is what?
No, you can't do that. That's illegal. You need to report her to the board.
It's not she's changing her notes. It's like I have a note from December 12th from 2018, 2 months after my surgery, where it says that I'm back on my old opioid regimen. The benefit, I met with two addiction doctors who say I do not have opioid misuse disorder, whatever that's called. She checked the PDMP, and there's no red flags. That's on December 12th. And then all of a sudden, I'm actually looking at them as I'm speaking with you.
Yeah, can you phrase this in terms of a question that we can help you with?
Yeah, I just don't know. So December, there was no problem. Then all of a sudden, a month later, she's saying I've had multiple issues of misuse over the past 6 to 8 months.
Okay, if she's put something untruthful...
So I don't know what I can...
Yeah, no, you need to report her to the Board of Registration in Medicine in your state. You go online. They have a little place for complaints, and they will investigate it. You just put in there that she apparently...
Who's your insurance?
Yeah, who's your insurer? Who's your insurance company, caller?
UPMC. Hello?
Oh, go ahead.
Is it through an employer or is it through an employer?
Yeah, UPMC is my insurance and my employer.
So you work for the insurance company?
No, I work at a hospital that they own. I'm a plumber. So
okay.
That's the other thing.
Is insurance program self-insured?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah,
Okay.
One of the
One thing,
biggest
and this will work anywhere down the line, is there someone within that hospital system, either be HR, legal, CFO, that can tell because what you think is the insurer is paying out the hospital's money for claims. They're not really an insurance company. They're a paper shuffler. And if you get into a corner where somebody they refuse to pay for something, the insurance payer, go to whoever is over the ERISA. That's what the self-insured programs say, and say, hey, we need to get this covered. And they can tell them, pay it.
No, well, what about the doctor writing notes in the chart intimating this man is really an addict or substance abuse disorder, and so they're trying to push Suboxone?
I was hoping he was on. I was hoping he was on Medicare. That would have been the direction I was going, but he's not.
I got you.
So
yeah, anytime a doctor does something that's illegal, which is falsifying notes, it's time to report them to the Board of Registration in Medicine for an investigation. Doctors cannot write false notes. I cannot make up diagnoses in your case and claim that you are a substance abuse disorder, which, by the way, is not a real disease. You either have addiction or you don't. The government has made up this new disease, and they obviously made it up because I saw the figures from the federal agency, the Substance Abuse Agency, and said we had 1.2 million people with substance abuse disorder and 500,000 heroin addicts. So, whoa, addicts and substance abuse disorder are two different things. The psychiatrist came up with substance abuse disorder to get away from the bad word addiction. Big mistake. They should have stuck with addiction. Everybody knows what that is. And then this agency, to get more money, started to fiddle with the psychiatrist's definition, which sounded pretty much like an addict. And now their definition is anybody who takes medicine other than what it says on the bottle. Now, majority of pain patients have pain one day and less pain the next. And so they take a variable amount. One day they'll take 2, the next day they'll take 4. Now guess what? You're a substance abuse disorder, and we can go get more money. You ought to see how much money the Substance Abuse Agency gets and how much has been increased by creating this disease. It is a deception. You cannot take the American Psychiatric Association's definition of addiction, which is opioid use disorder, and change it without checking in with the American Psychiatric Association, But they did anyway.
I think they broadened the definition more than you even are saying. What I'm seeing is anybody who takes an opiate legally or illegally, or legal or illegally opiate, for greater than 90 days has an opiate use disorder.
Oh, my God. See, they're just making it up as they go along to get more money, because one of the things that's happened with all this, like the caller says, the woman is lying. She's making up stuff. A doctor, right? A professional person is making up stuff so that she can somehow treat you with Suboxone. And as our pharmacist, Steve, says, hey, that's just going to label you. Then the police department that hunches over these computers every day, thinking they're junior medical detectives. Ooh, look at this. 36 pills. Oh, my God. We need to arrest this doctor. Yeah, it's a pretty easy arrest, too, because, you see, we doctors carry the evidence on us. We're like criminals carrying around all the guilty evidence because our medical records we carry around with us, so to speak. And then they look at the medical records and they say, well, you're obviously a criminal. You prescribed, guess what? 600 pills. Oh, my goodness, 600 pills. And we, police department, think that's a lot. So back to our caller, when stuff like that happens, when there is gross negligence on the part of a physician, you report them to the Board of Registration in Medicine. A lot of people are afraid if they do that, they're going to come back at the patient. Well, you know what? They get so scared they actually can be helpful. And if they do come back, you file another complaint. And you say, now the doctor is continuing to act unprofessionally and is trying to do this to me because I complained. Very easy to do. You go online. Yeah, you go online to the medical board, and they got a button there. And I tell people to write it ahead of time and cut and paste it. And always be nice and polite and courteous, even though your doctor's not being. And just factual, no emotional words, no words like very or terrible. Here's what she apparently wrote. It'd be good for you to request records from her, and if she refuses, you put that in the complaint because those belong to you. But that's a case that should be reported. And thanks for calling us. I appreciate it.
We do have a couple more calls if you'd like to take those.
Okay, go ahead.
Sure.
Okay.
Night's young.
Night's young.
Caller from 678. What's your first name and what's your question for Dr. Kline and Steve? Hello? Hello, caller.
Hello?
678. Yeah, go ahead.
There
What's
she
your
is.
first name and what's your question for Dr. Kline?
Hi, my name's Dana. Dr. Kline, Steve. Dr. Kline, I spoke with you just a couple of weeks ago, and it was about my doctor. And I go on Tuesday, and I'm taking all the information with me that we spoke about. And I very much looked to walk away dismissed at the very least. However, I do have a backup that I hope is going to work. But my other question is, should I record my conversation that I have with this doctor?
No. It's illegal in some states, and also that's very adversarial. You can take notes.
There's only 12 states there's only 12 states that have dual party mandatory notification.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. But I prefer to take
the
rest are okay.
Yeah.
Just take a little notebook with you, and also take another person. Never go to an adversarial doctor meeting alone. Okay, because you got a witness. Simple. And you just write down the notes, and you say, "Doctor, why are you reducing this?" And then you write that down. And you say, "Well, doctor, I've been going on the internet a lot, and I don't think what you said is correct, because guess what? There is no reason to reduce someone's medicine of any kind unless it's not working or you're having a side effect. So if they're giving you something about the DEA or something the doctor's afraid, you just write it down. And then you say, "Doctor, I'm sorry. I just don't think that's a valid reason to put me in harm's way. And I'm going to file a complaint with the Board of Registration." Now, they may cut you off and you won't get any more medicines. But, it's kind of up to you. You can also just quietly file a complaint with the Board of Registration saying they're trying to cut me off and they claim this is the reason. And I would like you to investigate and see if this is a reason. In other words, let them investigate. Don't do their work for them. You just present the problem. Go ahead, Steve.
There's another path. Path. Hire an attorney to file the complaint for you, and you hide behind the attorney-client privilege.
Yep, that's a good one. And a lot of people don't have attorneys. A lot of the people I speak with or their lives have been wrecked by their diseases, and then now even worse, taking them off their medicines. But one good way to find a lawyer is to go to a lawyer and draft a will. That's the first thing they teach you in law school. And you can get inexpensive wills, a standard will for maybe a couple $100. And you pay the lawyer right then and there. And now you have a lawyer. The lawyer now becomes, you now have a client-lawyer relationship. So then when you pick up the phone and you call in, you say, "Can I come in and talk to you about this other issue?" Usually they say yes. And now that you're a client, you're going to get more help than if you call blindly to a lawyer and you say, "I'm having trouble with my opiates." That's not going to get you very far. Mm-hmm. But once you're in the practice, you see, if a person comes to me and I sit down with them and I examine them, they become my patients. And so that's a big deal. When they call me, I'm liable to speak to them first before I speak to a stranger. It's the old-fashioned quid pro quo. It's the old-fashioned establishing relationships. I have a relationship with my plumber. I've been his customer. So when I call, he comes out. He doesn't put me off, So by getting a will made, which people should have anyway, and it just can be a simple one-page will, but the lawyer does it right and shows you how to, do it and all the ins and outs. But now you have a lawyer. And Steve is correct. A call from a lawyer really makes medical people sweat. If you're having problems in an emergency room or you're having problems in a hospital, you just have your lawyer call and just get some information. They're not suing them or doing anything complicated. Most lawyers will do this kind of work for about an hour's charge, which is around $200. And so you may have to say.
But most boards won't take an anonymous complaint.
No, it shouldn't be.
Around the anonymous.
Yeah, no. Yeah,
but if you use an attorney, then it's not anonymous.
Yeah, you can use an attorney to file the complaint, or you can file it yourself. But yeah, you must include your name. They don't. Right. They don't do anonymous. That's a good point. So you can file it yourself, or you can have your lawyer call the doctor's office and say, my client here is concerned that you put some things in the medical record. Now, is this true? In other words, those kinds of questions from lawyers are just information gathering, and they can help you out. And if they don't want to help you out, then, you're screwed. Because then you got to find another lawyer, and you can't write two wills. So, you're kind of playing guts ball. And but you're operating under the rules of business and professions. And, that's better than just calling out of the blue. So, caller, did we rattle on too much?
That sounds good. Caller, thank you for the call. We appreciate it. We do have one more if you'd like to go ahead and do that. Okay.
Okay.
Caller from area code 262. What's your name and what's your question for Dr. Kline and Dr. Steve?
Hi, this is Dave. Hi, doctors. Two things. Interesting development in Wisconsin today. A police captain. His wife was cut off of her pain medicine. Now, I don't know what her original use was for. But
I read the headlines. I didn't read the article.
Yeah, fill us in.
Thank you. He dipped into the drug take-back program
to get her medicines for
filed.
Her. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was, I don't know if he was apologetic, but somehow he telegraphed it so clearly. They set up a camera. This is past the rumor stage.
Mm-hmm.
They caught him. They searched his house and found bottles without their names on it. So
yeah. Hang him high.
That happened. And it just shows how this thing is.
Yeah, he was trying to get medicine.
It shows how this thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's got to really put a human face on the problem. Like your mother and my mother are both mothers, and kind of brings us all together into the problem, which is pain, and it can't be a law enforcement problem, and it can't be a addict problem, or anyway. I just noted that happened, and. Dr. Helena,
but I didn't read the article. So
thank you. That's okay. It was very short. It's past the rumor stage. He's been relieved of duty in a small town in southeastern Wisconsin. Today, that story broke. And Dr. Helena Gazelka.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dr. Helena Gazelka at the Senate Help Committee. How damaging? How big was that? And do we have any follow-up yet? Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. The Senate committee, that kind of blew by me. It's these big earmuff earphones I'm forced to wear by the producers.
Yeah.
So do you know what he was mentioning? Okay. Do we have any other callers?
Well, he was talking.
That's it.
He was talking about that female doctor that really kind of lobbed a bunch of bombs.
Okay.
My concern about all of this is all this stuff is going on, and there's one entity that is always absent from any of these discussions.
Yes.
And that's the DEA.
Oh yeah, I've only received one email from the DEA. They don't email people. You go on their website to find out, and it was a strange email. All it said was the CDC monitors, blah blah blah, and that was it. They didn't say we're adopting the CDC, but since the Attorney General adopted it, guess what? They were relaying the information to us that they are adopting the CDC guidelines, the Federal Drug Police. And you have to remember, too, that even though we're critical of the DEA, they are under the jurisdiction of the Attorney Generals. So it's really the Attorney Generals that we need to have them explain themselves. Go ahead, Steve.
But he was, there was not a representative at that meeting. There's never been a representative of the DEA at any, public forum where other stuff is discussed around pain.
Yeah.
They're always absent. And another thing that I've noticed is that cops make raids and get shot when they're raiding households, and there's never a DEA agent involved in that raid. But when it comes to raiding a doctor's office, they're always there.
Oh, there are lots of cameras and stuff.
But they're also a lot less likely to get shot.
Oh, these are easy arrests. And do you know that 95% of doctors charged are forced into plea bargains, and plea bargains are written down as successful prosecutions, and they go to Congress and get more money. So, but Steve, I want to ask you to switch in subjects for a minute. I've heard from other pharmacists that the benefits manager system, pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs, I guess were set up under the George Bush. We're going to help you pay for your prescriptions, which was a nice program. It was a good program, and no, you don't think so. All right.
No,
well,
they were first started. They were first started with a contract with the UAW and John Deere and International Harvester in the fall negotiations in 1969.
Okay.
And they've expanded from there.
All right, so the government becoming involved again, But anyway, I've heard that the pharmacy benefit managers, which are only three large wholesalers, supposedly, were mandated by the federal government to negotiate with drug companies, since there's a law that you can't negotiate. So I guess they were trying to get around it. And from what I've heard from pharmacies, they're filling anywhere from 30 to 40% of their prescriptions for nothing, because of the deals cut by the benefit managers behind the scenes. And apparently Medicaid is run by a different system and runs very nicely. And so even President Trump said pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs, need to go. What's your take on that? Yes, that's a good answer.
I just made a post on this tonight. That in Ohio alone, they are suing him now. Ohio is only 3% of the national population. The AG in Ohio claims that CVS Health Caremark has 4 of the Medicaid HMOs, and Optimum, I think, had the other one, and collectively they have overcharged the state $224 million over a couple of years. Okay, in West Virginia, which only has a population of 1.3 or 1.8 million people, and again, this is Medicaid population, and they didn't release the PBM that was responsible. They dumped their ass, and in 2017, they saved $30 million in their Medicaid drug budget.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. That sounds like an HMO arrangement, but I guess the Medicaid programs in most states, the pharmacy part is managed in a different way. And according to pharmacists that I've talked to here in Raleigh, and one of the lobbyists for independent pharmacies, is that system works real well. And the original reason for pharmacy benefit managers was to negotiate and return the money to the federal government. And guess what? They figured out a way to keep it all. That sound right?
Well, let me tell you this. My wife has a prescription she's taken for a decade. We have Silver Scripts, which is part of Caremark and CVS. Mm-hmm. They want a PA on it, and for a 90-day supply, they wanted $600 and some odd copay.
Oh. So this?
I called up.
Go ahead.
I called up Costco, and guess how much I paid cash for the same thing?
$140.
87. And my $600 copay, and it's a PA. That was a 40% copay, so there's $1,500 collectively floating around out there.
Okay, that's something that people
paid $87.
That's good that you mentioned that, because the way to escape this horrible mess is to buy them yourself. Now, here are the cheapos. Oxycodone immediate release is very inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
Hydromorphone or Dilaudid immediate release, very inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
The long-acting MS Contin, inexpensive.
Yes.
And a drug we don't use enough for chronic pain, methadone, very inexpensive. So those are the big four. Go ahead, Steve.
I kind of waver back and forth on methadone because, it can have some cardiac issues, and it has a variable half-life. And if you get a prescriber that doesn't know what they're doing,
no, you're right.
EKG,
and here's how pharmacists and doctors can work together, and they really should, because whenever I move into a town, I always look for an independent pharmacist because they know about drugs. I know something about drugs, but that's not my whole profession. So I always rely on the local pharmacists, and I do here too in Raleigh, independent pharmacists, saying, what are your thoughts? And the pharmacist should be up to date on, or at least somebody in the pharmacy can be up to date on how to properly use methadone. I think most physicians stay away from it because they know that. They know that it's a little tricky, and you got to tell your patients, don't be swallowing these things when you're in pain. But, there's a little bit of a protocol that goes along with it. But in terms of cost, if you feel you get your back up against the cheapest. Wall, yeah, it's the cheapest. And then so you got three choices. You got the long-acting methadone, you got the moderate-acting MS Contin, you've got, and then two choices, Dilaudid and Oxycodone, that are really very inexpensive. I was surprised to find out how inexpensive they were. I didn't know that because, see, we doctors don't have a clue as to how much things cost. And that's something else that pharmacists can share. And I have a lot of pharmacists now, the pharmacists I work with, we text each other, so stop this calling in and you're right in the middle of filling a prescription, you can text each other and then you can answer later, when the customer's not there, you're not with a patient, and get the pharmacist working more closely with the doctors, having designated pharmacy consultants. Don't even have to be in the same pharmacy. You could pool some pharmacy. Okay, you got a tricky question like, how should I start methadone? Here's the it's kind of like the poison control line. You got
carefully.
You got carefully. Yeah, you got to go carefully. This is don't anybody out there that's on methadone for pain. You have to go carefully because basically it takes 5 days to kick in. So there you are. But it's in talking to
it has a variable half-life.
And it has a variable half-life, so you have to titrate it very carefully. But if you go slowly enough, you'll be okay. I have to check an electrocardiogram. It's a little different than the other ones, but that's no big deal. And a lot of people, and you check it after you've cranked up the dose. So there are a few guidelines, like there are with a lot of medicines that we prescribe. But those are the big four that if you're really getting stuck, pharmacies are now limiting like to 180 pills a month, as though every single person on the planet, falls into the same category. But they're just making money. See,
you heard what Walmart's doing?
No, what?
Have you heard what Walmart's doing?
No, go ahead.
On opiate-naive patients, 7 days and maximum of 50 NMEs, irregardless of what the doctor wrote.
Yeah, well, there's something to be said because that's actually the only thing in the CDC regulation or guidelines that they actually said. They said when you're first starting a prescription, limit it to 90 milligrams. The 90 milligrams is really for nothing else. If you read carefully this horribly written mess, took me months to read this. It was the worst written thing I'd ever seen. It's like a bunch of high school kids.
But they're limiting it to 50.
Okay, yeah. If 90 is good,
they're limited
50
to 50
is better. Why not go to go to 5 million? It's pretty horrible out there, and it's getting worse. So we need to do things, and we need to go to Congress and talk to them about the pharmacy benefit managers and where did the money go? Where did the money go? They were supposed to be saving.
Before Mark cuts us off here, you said you're in Raleigh?
Yeah.
Okay. Our daughter's in Durham.
Yeah.
We need to sit down and have lunch the next time we come to visit the daughter.
Sure. Happy to. If you pay, I'll go to lunch anywhere.
McDonald's.
Sure. They have my name down there. I drive up to McDonald's and go, "Hi, Dr. Kline."
We're coming down in a couple of months. Grandparents' day at school, so we'll have to get them sit down to meal and talk.
All right, sounds good to me. All right, well, it looks like it's time to wrap up. Do you have any final comments?
Clock on my wall.
Yeah,
I don't either. This is no small subject that we're tackling, so I didn't think we was going to solve it all tonight.
Well, keep writing, and I am trying to move toward figuring out solutions. And we do have a new Congress in the House of Representatives, anyway, and it doesn't matter whether they're Democrats or Republicans, they're new, and they're looking for new ideas.
Yeah.
And I found out the other day that
go
ahead.
Did you read about that law firm in Independence, Kentucky, that's suing the pain clinic for refusing to give oral opiates unless they get ESIs?
Well, you know what? I haven't read that, but we are in the midst of a Twitter poll, and it looks like 62% of patients are reporting being extorted. That's almost 2/3.
Well, there's already a lawsuit been filed, and I've got paperwork from the attorney on the second one.
Okay, excellent.
I'm going to be a pharmaceutical expert for him, I think.
Yeah,
so,
well,
I've
always said the courts are the answer to this mess. The courts are what stopped the McCarthyism. They had federal laws that you could be arrested for going to a guy's barbecue, and he was a communist, and they were finally all struck down. But it's the courts, really, that can help us. I think there should be an injunction filed against Medicare. Medicare's adopted the CDC regulations that aren't rules. Yeah. How can a federal agency do that? It's kind of like we're ranting, aren't we?
They really didn't adopt them themselves. They pushed them on to their PMP or their Part D providers to enforce it.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, wasn't that sneaky?
Yeah. So they can't be, say that the government's interfering.
I see.
So because all the Part Ds are private, for-profit.
Gotcha.
Companies.
Well, let's just end this by saying there is no evidence yet presented that the CDC guidelines are actually valid, because they are not. 100%. They are invalid. Period.
The problem with the CDC guidelines, and in totality, in my opinion, they're not that bad. But most prescribers are finding a sentence or a paragraph or a page they like out of the 90-some-odd pages and go, here's what I'm going by. And usually has to do with 90 MMEs.
Well, you are correct. And if you read it carefully, it's basically a boilerplate. It's kind of a sophomoric thing. But it is time to go. And Pharmacist Steve, it's really fun having you on. And anybody who wants to follow Pharmacist Steve, just plug into your old Google Pharmacist Steve. And you'll go to his website, and one of the best cartoons ever, we're going to try to get it up on the air, is the guy looking through the big magnifying glass about the opioid crisis. One of my favorites, and we're gonna figure out how to put things up on our little website here so that people can see them, and that's definitely one worth copying. So I'd like to say good night.
I try to get some clip art that makes fun at what's going on.
Well, that's we need to do that. We need to be kind of smiling and while we make our points. All All right, thanks, Steve, again for coming on, and
Okay.
Brian for running the show, and
Have a good night.
to Dr. Kline, one of the neatest doctors I've ever run across. Oops.
This has been The Doctor's Corner with Dr. Kline and Janelle Elgaway. Copyright 2018. All rights reserved.